Oh man, we bounced back from a really boring session to a really interesting one. A near TPK, people forgetting their abilities, lots of new information learned, multiple times splitting the party, diseases, a lost PC, a PC death. Really wild stuff ahead. I hope you guys enjoy it. Hey everyone, it's Nick. When last we left our heroes, they had landed on the island of Wanale, the largest island in the region, and they were trying to explore it and see if it was safe so that their crew could repair the ship there. They also have a stronghold on the island that they had won in a game of chance, and they wanted to check that out as well and see what they could find there. And so that was where they had been exploring and trying to make sure it was safe. Several of the players contracted diseases, though only one had shown symptoms last session. The other two showed their symptoms this session, and it was crazy indeed. Because Travis, who was on last watch, had completely vanished. They saw no signs of a struggle or conflict. They just saw a set of tracks meandering off into the jungle sort of aimlessly. And to make matters worse, Clement, the sorcerer, couldn't speak. Like, he couldn't form or conjure words or utter them at all. So they were in a bit of a pickle. So out of game, I had messaged Hunter, playing Travis, and said, hey, these are the symptoms that you're going to be experiencing when you wake up as Travis. And so I didn't tell him what it was, what the effect was. I didn't tell him how he had gotten it, how long it might last. I just told him these are what you will be feeling and experiencing. And I did that for a couple of reasons. Mostly, I didn't want to explain all of that in front of the other players. I wanted to be able to say, hey, Hunter, the thing we talked about, that happens as Travis wakes up. And I wanted the players to get the experience of finding out what was going on from Travis, not from me telling Hunter. And so when as often as possible, I try to make sure that the player's experience matches their character's experience. So I take people out of the room for things, and I message them on Facebook during the session or before the session, so that stuff will be a little bit secret and players can reveal that themselves as opposed to just hearing me narrate it to them. So we were discussing these options, and we said, what might Travis do with this symptom, whatever it is? And he was saying one of the things might be that he would just run away, just leave the party. And I thought that was kind of interesting. That might present some things. And then Hunter realized during our conversation that he was actually going to be out of town for the session, was going to miss it. And so I was like, actually, that works really well. We'll have Hunter be on last watch, and when all the rest of the party wake up, he'll be gone and he'll have just wandered off into the jungle. Now, this wasn't just me, the DM, coming up with a way to conveniently get rid of a player character who wasn't going to have a player for them in a session. It was genuinely what Travis would do according to Hunter, and so it just happened to really work out that he would leave for a time and be split up from the party. And I said, I don't know what's going to happen to Travis as he goes away. We're sort of going to figure it out as we pick up based on where the party gets to and where they end. So I'm going to put a pin in Travis's story for now and see where he gets to based on what the party does with that information. So I had all of that ready for the start of the session, and they were all ready to go and follow Travis's tracks and see where he had gone. But the first thing that the players realized about Clement, the sorcerer, losing the ability to speak was something that I had completely overseen. It was a terrible oversight on my part, but they realized he wouldn't be able to cast any verbal spells, and because he didn't take the subtle spell metamagic option, the only spell available to him was Shape Water, the cantrip. Not exactly a reliable combat spell, but that was the only spell he was able to cast because that was the nature of the symptom of the disease he had contracted. It turned out to be pretty devastating for him to only be able to cast Shape Water, but that's for later. So they were following Travis's tracks, sort of meandering aimlessly. The tracks don't seem to have any clear direction or path. They're changing direction frequently. They're just wandering. And they're trying to figure out what to do here. At this point, they check in with Callister, who was back on the beach overseeing the crew as they were repairing the ship, and he has left the crew because he went to go and explore his castle all on his own and go and see what he could find there. And he noticed a bunch of lizard men in and around the castle, and the players sort of relayed all this information telepathically to one another and tried to communicate it, and they put two and two together and realized that the lizard folk who had ambushed them the previous day must be part of the group living in the keep or castle, and so there must be like more of them, a whole tribe living there, and these are just the hunters. And once again, I walked them right up to the edge of the information and let them take the jump and make the conclusion. That is absolutely correct. That is what was going on. And they realized they could communicate also telepathically with Travis, and so they tried multiple times, and the first few times nothing really happened, and then eventually it started to seem like Travis was replying as if they were voices inside his head, and he didn't understand where they were coming from, and he was like, no, I'm not going to communicate with these voices in my head, you're not real. And so that was very strange for the players. They were trying to like pretend they were gods and saying, you need to come to this location or we'll smite you, and it was very interesting, very odd, but that was the interaction as they were trying to telepathically communicate with Travis. What's he saying? What's he doing? He's not really responding, and when he is, he's pretending like we're just voices in his head. That's really weird. So they're trying to figure out where he is and what's going on, and they're not getting a lot of progress with that. So they decide, okay, let's meet up with Callister, get his help, and try to figure it out. Initially, they wanted to just say, okay, hey, Callister, come this many miles into the jungle and we'll meet up. And I was like, guys, I just want to let you know, this is a really large, really dense, overgrown jungle, and just using relative distances is not going to be very helpful because neither of you have maps and no one has been here before. So it's going to be really tough to try to find each other. And they're like, oh yeah, good point. Okay, so maybe we will go both north to Keel Crush Cove, and there's a whole channel there, and we can just follow the coast. It's a common landmark. We'll follow the coast until we find each other, and I figured that'll work a lot easier. That'll be much more possible than trying to find each other somehow in a very dense jungle that no one has been to and is not mapped. However, while they were separated, Tico, Orar, and Clement were ambushed by two Kamadan. And it was supposed to be just a random encounter that I had generated, but this fight was crazy on so many levels. First off, the Kamadan have a really interesting ability to breathe and just knock you unconscious if you fail your saving throw. The end. Doesn't matter how many hit points you have, it doesn't do any damage, it just knocks you unconscious. It's called sleep breath. It's crazy. However, it's gated by the fact that it has a really low saving throw, so it's really easy to beat. However, 2 of the 3 players failed that really easy saving throw. So the battle starts off with 2 unconscious, sleeping players, and the only one who made his saving throw is Clement, the guy who can cast Shape Water and throw daggers. So it was kind of crazy as the whole fight played out, and I told Callister, hey, you can hear sounds of combat from up ahead, and they're telepathically communicating, hey, Callister, we're in trouble, can you come help us? And so he's running along the beach trying to get there in time, but he wasn't quite in range when the fight started, and so I had him start several hundred yards away, and it's going to take him a couple rounds to get there, and all this stuff, and so the players go through this fight, and I figured it was going to be, not a lethal fight by any stretch of the imagination, just an interesting one. But as the battle unfolds, Clement wakes up Orar, but then Clement goes unconscious and is bleeding out and goes to 0 and starts taking a ton of damage. And Tico also, as he's asleep the whole time, he also goes below 0 and is unconscious. And so the battle starts to take this wild shift and is going to be really, really deadly and looking like they're going to be in super big trouble. There's one of the players has 1 failed death saving throw, one of the players has 2 failed death saving throws, and at this time, the players start to realize some things. Orar and Tico are both elves. They can't be put to sleep magically, which this effect is. Clement also has ability that when he goes to 0 hit points, he instead can go to 1 hit point once per long rest because he's a half-orc now. Also, Tico has a magic item that prevents him from going below 0 or going to 0, and instead he regains hit points. So all these things, they forget how their own items and abilities and features work, which makes the fight much more dangerous than it was supposed to be. So I realized all this stuff, they realized all this stuff after the fact, and I said, okay, let's just have it all take effect now. Like, we're not going to go and retcon everything and walk backwards in the fight, but I also don't want to have any of those abilities not go off because they are your abilities and features. Just because you forgot them in the moment doesn't mean they're not valid anymore. So as they're bleeding out, these features and all the items activate and things start, and so the players are sort of saved from the fire there as their bacon was about to be severely crispy. And the players survived, they lived, but man, it was crazy. I didn't really feel bad because it was almost a TPK. They almost wiped the whole party. But that wasn't because of anything I did. It wasn't even all that lethal of a fight. They just forgot how all their stuff worked. And as it turns out, when you don't properly or effectively use any of your items, abilities, features, traits, the battles get harder. And so obviously there's going to be a lot of DMs who want to do things in different ways, but for me personally, I don't try to remember any of the players' stuff. That is on you. I don't remember or remind you about your items, abilities, features, traits. That's your character. I've got so many other things to do on my end that I'm not going to try to play your character for you. That's up to you to remember. So if it just so happens, a lot of times I know the rules of 5th edition really well. So if a player asks, hey, how does this condition work for sneak attack? I just so happen to know how sneak attack works and I can answer the question, but it's not up to me to remember that they have sneak attack. If they forget to do it, shoot, man, I'm running like 6 monsters over here. I got stuff to do. That's on you. So a lot of players and DMs might do things differently, and that's totally okay. But for me, that's on the players. I'm not going to remember their stuff for them. So it was close, but I wouldn't have felt bad about a TPK there because I didn't do anything wrong. The players didn't know their stuff. But disaster was averted. Nobody died. They all survived, and they made it out the other side relatively unscathed. But that was when they decided to heal up a little bit and then regroup and go back down into the jungle to figure out where Travis's tracks were and go and find them and track him down. So they eventually found a clearing where it looked like somebody had made camp, but it also looked like there had been a battle there of some sort. It looked like there had been guns shot there and blood in places and lots of different footprints and tracks leading out of it. In fact, it looked like there had been a mighty duel.
There was mighty duel.
Great movie. Anyways, they had deduced from the situation, from the tracks they had spotted, that Travis had been there and had been ambushed by the same lizard folk, and they had taken him off. They didn't see any tracks of Travis's exiting, but they saw many lizard folk tracks exiting towards the keep, towards the castle. So they figured Travis must have been ambushed here, and so he got captured by the lizard folk, and we gotta go save him. He's in the castle somewhere, which is correct. And after a bad acid trip by And after Callister ate some strange fruit and went on a crazy acid trip, the players then continued. Don't eat strange fruit, kids. And the players continued towards the castle and wanted to scope it out and see if they could find information, see if they could spot Travis, and so they got all the way up as far as the jungle could take them, trying to remain hidden. Callister then cast invisibility on himself and made his way into the keep and castle to sort of see what he could see. He's invisible and nobody will notice him. He goes up and surveys the area and he sees lots of lizard folk in there. 80, maybe 120. It's hard to know exactly because he can't see everyone. There are some people in the keep. He doesn't want to go in there. But inside the castle walls, there are many, many lizard folk there. It looks like a whole tribe. Also, he notices a bunch of slaves that have been captured by the lizard folk. They're mostly orcs and half-orcs, but also some humans. And he learns from Tobias, his sentient ring, that the lizard folk have natural enemies in a tribe of orcs that live to the north of here. And that's where these slaves must have come from. Callister also knows, because he is by fate the owner, rightfully, of this stronghold, he knows the 3 entrances into this castle. There's the main gates, obviously. There is docks set way below on the cliffside. The castle is sort of up on some cliffs and it slopes down into the jungle, but the cliffs lead to the water. Like straight over the edge of the cliffs are down several hundred feet is the ocean. And so there are docks down there for ships and trade and things like that, and there is a cave and a set of stairs that lead up from the docks into the castle grounds. There is also a secret entrance and exit through the vaults set below the keep itself. There is like a single person kind of exit that leads out midway up the cliffs. There is an illusion, it's disguised, it's out through the vault, so it's sort of like a last-ditch escape effort for important people if push comes to shove and the castle is totally overcome. So Callister knows of these entrances and exits, he learns about all this information, and so he decides to egress from the situation and go and relay all that information back to his companions, who take all this information and form a pretty good plan with it. They're going to take this information back to their ship and make sure it is repaired, and then they're going to put the ship in the water, and they will sail north and go to the orc tribe and say, hey, we have natural enemies that match up. Let's go and get these lizard folk out of this castle, and let's go and save your people. Let's team up. And so they're going to enlist the help of this whole orc tribe and go and siege the castle. It's going to be really interesting there. And so that is their plan. However, the wrench is thrown in their plan the next day. They get back to the ship, and Clement regains the ability to speak, which is great. Go him. However, that next morning, Callister comes up with his own idea. He says, hey, I want to go and ask information of the orcs that are slaves there. I want to go back to the castle. He's going to travel north several hours and go back to the castle and ask some slaves some questions. He's going to cast invisibility on himself again. He'll be fine. The problem is no one wanted to go with him. Like, nobody thought about it. He was just like, I'm just going to go up by myself. And everyone's reaction was basically just, hey, make sure you're back in time for the ship getting put into water early this afternoon. And no one put two and two together as like, maybe this is dangerous. Maybe you're going alone with no help or assistance into knowingly dangerous territory, specifically to a spot we haven't explored in the docks beneath the castle. He's going to go there and use the stairwell to climb up and enter. And no one really challenged this idea. And as you can tell by the way I'm saying this, it's a bad one. So I looked down at my notes because I know that I've had written down for weeks that the docks are derelict. They're mostly empty and decrepit, but they're inhabited by a bunch of crocs. No, the other kind. Yeah, crocs. Anyways, so there's a bunch of crocodiles living there, and I know that that's what's written down in my notes, and I have a choice here. The players haven't experienced this, so it's not really real yet. It hasn't come into the scene, and so just because it's written in my notes doesn't necessarily make it real. It hasn't been experienced by the players. So I could just erase that. I could just make it empty, and if I had, it would have been pretty interesting, actually. He would have gone up through the docks, walked up the stairwell, and interacted with the orcs, gotten some information for how to better interact with and negotiate with the orc tribe, and gone back to his crew. No big deal. However, I don't want to personally get in the mindset and the habit of changing the world to make the players' plans work. Even if it's not that big a deal, my mindset is more of the world is the world. It's up to you guys to make sure your plans work. They already had all the information they needed to know this wasn't a good idea. They knew it was a dangerous area. The docks were not explored. They knew going alone is dangerous, that it happened multiple times, that it was really, really dangerous for them. And so I didn't feel that I had to change it for them. And I knew as he was walking in that it was going to be dangerous for him. I tried to give him some outs. I said, hey, make a perception check as you walk in to maybe he can spot the crocs and notice them. I also said, hey, are you casting invisibility on yourself now, or are you going to wait until later? And he said later. And so it's like, all right, he failed his roll to notice the crocs, and he's not invisible. So as soon as he walks in, the crocs ambush him, and one player by himself, without any help or assistance, and without the ability to cast any spells that can let him escape, he has no teleportation, nothing like that, he died. He got eaten by crocs. And no one was really all that surprised. I mean, obviously people were upset. There was a character death, and that's not always a great thing, but no one was all that surprised or upset at me. No one blamed me because they were like, oh yeah, that's a really dangerous area and we hadn't explored it yet. Of course you might get eaten. A very unceremonious and anticlimactic ending to Callister, to be sure. However, you can only tempt fate so many times. You can only wander off on your own and stick your finger in the fire before you eventually get burned. And this was Callister's time to fully get toasted. And so that was the end of Callister. In fact, the players were mostly upset that they lost Tobias, the sentient ring. They really liked seeing him role-played and liked the information that he could give them. So I don't know how they're going to find that out, if they can ever get him back. But right now, that's where we ended things. That's where we ended the session. Travis is still captured by the lizard folk. Clement has the ability to speak. Tico is still in a haze and still under the confusion effects. Callister is dead, but no one knows it yet. And so they're trying to communicate with him telepathically, getting no response. They think he's been captured by the lizard folk. And all the players are sailing north, trying to enlist the help of the orc tribe. So that's where we left things. Jason is making a new character that we will see next session. Really exciting. Hopefully he doesn't commit suicide right away, like Jason's characters sometimes do, but I'm having a lot of fun running for these players. I think it's nuts, it's crazy, but it's so much fun. It's D&D. So next week should be a wild session for sure, because it always is with these players. But thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.